Well, good afternoon. My name is Dan Harris. I'm a beekeeper. I am going to open up this box here in a minute. In it is, or the result of, what is called a walkaway split from about 5 weeks ago. Now, for those of you who are not beekeepers, a walkaway split, basically there was a hive full of bees, brood, honey, pollen, and a queen, and I divided that hive and took the queen with some bees, brood, honey, and pollen and made a separate hive out of those, and I left behind bees, brood, and some pollen and frames with brood, and in particular frames with eggs. The idea with a walkaway split is that the bees will then set about to converting several of those eggs into queen cells, produce a replacement queen hopefully, and that queen then will take some mating flights and begin to lay. And if all has gone as I hope, there should be a laying queen in here, and I'm going to migrate them into a full-size 10-frame box if that's the case. And we'll take a look as we go through this process. I would tell you that around here, walkaway splits work about 80% of the time for various reasons. The bees don't always either make a successful replacement queen, or in some instances those queens fail to return from their mating flights. And so in those instances, if this is queenless, and here we are 5 weeks later, I will probably just shake them out in the bee yard, let the bees find new homes in some of the neighboring hives, and move the frames in here to other hives for them to use. So that's the gist of it. Let's take a look, see what we've got. I popped the top a week or so after the split to make sure they had made queen cells, which they had done. And I checked again later and did not see a queen, which is not unusual because a newly emerged unmated queen is difficult to distinguish from the worker bees. They are a lot of times not visibly dramatically different, and once they mate and their abdomens become more elongated, more distended, they're a little more easy to find. At that point, I generally just let them ride for a little bit, give the queen time to mate so she'll be easier to find, and there'll be some evidence of her hopefully in here. So that's basically what I'm doing. We'll see what we've got, and I've got 4 or 5 of these around here today. I've got to go through. They were all made about the same time, and we'll see if we've had any luck. All right, this frame, yes, we have had great luck, it would appear, or at least some luck. Ordinarily, I don't know if this shows or not, but they're putting up honey in a ring, and in the middle are what appear to be empty cells. That usually is a good indication, if those cells are still empty, that they do have a queen, or they're responding to queen pheromones. They're leaving an area for that queen to lay eggs in, and then surrounding it with honey. That's a good sign. I can look, I have to get the light just right to look down in these, but I can see that there's actually some very new brood in there. So even if I don't see this queen, I'm pretty confident we've made one. And there she is, and there is some brood. Hopefully, she's right here. I don't know if you can see her. She's agitated. We're gonna move her pretty quickly. Here's some capped brood and some uncapped brood. So we made a replacement queen. This is, it's called, they're called emergency queens. The colony of bees discovers suddenly that they're queenless, and then they start to convert eggs that were originally intended to be worker bees, and they begin to feed them differently, and they create a different cell. And because queen bees, all right, this is honey on the outside, but these brown caps are pupating bees. So she's been in there and she's been laying for, you know, it looks like a couple of weeks. This side's the same thing. So this is a success story. So always happy to have a success story. So that's what we look for. Basically, worker bees and queen bees are genetically the same. The difference is, they are putting up honey. The difference is, we need to get them in a bigger box. The difference between a queen and a worker bee, the things that make her physiologically different and reproductively allow her to mature, are not genetic, but are actually in their upbringing and their nurturing as they were developing. They're fed typically worker brood. When it is a recently hatched egg, they initially are fed royal jelly, but then the nurse bees stop feeding them royal jelly and begin to feed them brood food, which is a little different than royal jelly. Cells that were considered, or eggs that hatch and are intended to be queens, are fed royal jelly right from the beginning and throughout their development until they start to pupate. So a queen becomes physiologically different for two reasons. One is the way she's fed. Well, I didn't need to do that. One is the way she's fed, and the other is the size and orientation of the cell that she pupates in. A queen cell, you saw those tan-capped cells. We may have more, I don't know. Well, there's some here. These tan-capped cells, you notice that they're flush with the surface of the comb. Those are worker cells. A queen cell would protrude out and then vertically down. So the two things that will make a queen different are the cell size, shape, and orientation, and what she's fed as she's developing. So basically what's happened here is this queen was created from an existing egg originally intended to be a worker, and then she emerged. There may have been more than one queen cell made. They generally hedge their bets, and when they do, they make multiple cells. And when those cells emerge, those queens come out of the cell basically, and then they will seek one another out and they will fight to the death. And then the one that prevails becomes the new queen of the hive. So that's basically what's happened here. This queen, all of those cells that we saw that were capped, that's her first cycle of brood. So we don't have any newbies in here quite yet, but within the next week, there'll be literally thousands of new bees in here, which is why I'm getting in here, giving them more space, because this thing is going to fill up very quickly with new bees. I'm going to give them, I just moved them out of a 5-frame box. I'm moving them into a 10-frame box, and then this is wax foundation. It's a long story. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, you'll know why I'm using wax foundation. Long and short of it is, wax foundation has pretty much been abandoned by beekeepers. It's extremely tedious to build. This is how I spent my winter, and I still have a lot more of this to do. I don't know how much more I'll get done, but the long and short of it is that the bees are drawn to it much more readily than they are to plastic. And again, Some of the new plastic foundation has extra coatings of wax. I haven't tried any of that. I kind of opted for a sure thing this year because I needed a lot of new comb, and so I went with what I knew from experience worked, and that was wax foundation. Anyway, this is a Walkaway split, a successful Walkaway split. Got a mated new queen. I'll come back in another week or 10 days after they've settled down. I'll find her, try to find her before the population really gets huge, and I'll mark her while she's easy to find, without having to stir through tens of thousands of bees to find her, and then away we go. So, well, and I'm going to put a feeder on top. I'll feed them here in a minute. I always feed my new hives. I like to hedge my bets. I'm kind of like the bees in that regard. I like to give them every opportunity to succeed, and feeding them does just exactly that. So we leave all this stuff at the entrance. They're old stuff because there are bees in here, and I could bump them and, you know, just have them shake them out into the hive. And I do that if I'm in a hurry, but I'm going to be in this yard all day today, so I'll come back and pick up the equipment later. And there we are, moved. A good story.